Okay, welcome back to episode 4 of This Too Is Healing podcast. My name is Nettee and I'm your host. Today I am talking with Jen and Lauren. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. So today we're going to have a little chat and we're just going to go in a bit deeper to why we had to do a healing journey in the first place. You know, what events in our lives, what happened with us that we needed to then do a healing journey? Because, you know, everybody goes through something. Everybody. There's not a person on this planet that doesn't. So sharing stories, and this is why I like sharing stories, is really helpful because people then know that they're not alone, that it happens to other people. And, if that happened to them, but they managed to do this, then that might work for me. So that's another big reason why I'm doing this is sharing stories so that people know that they're A, they're not alone, but B, it is possible. It doesn't, we all go through some terrible things in our lives. But it is possible to turn that around and, it's not too late. You're not too old and, things haven't got so bad that you're not able to turn things around. So I'm going to speak to Lauren first, if you don't mind this time. So Lauren, okay, tell me and, just tell us whatever you would like to tell us about your healing journey, about why you had to do healing in the first place.
Thank you. Well, I love what you said in your introduction because you're absolutely right. No one gets through life as a human being without encountering difficult things and challenging times. And I think I would reflect that I was very blessed with the younger part of my life and my childhood, to grow up in a loving family and, in a pretty kind of privileged situation where we were, comfortable living in beautiful Devon. And honestly, the thing that first brought me to kind of healing and I suppose self-help and techniques like that was, I suppose, twofold. One was managing maybe some of the stress and pressure that I was putting on myself. I definitely grew up as a girl who was trying to be good at everything, trying to execute everything perfectly, trying to please people, and almost pathologically thinking about what other people's perceptions of me were before I was thinking about what was really important to me and what felt meaningful to me. And so when I first came to kind of meditation and mindfulness, and actually yoga, which kind of predated that, it was really about trying to manage, racing thoughts, anxiety, kind of pervasive self-criticism, which was impacting upon sleep, making me very self-analytical in social situations. And I found, those techniques started to really help with that. And what I did later find, and we touched on the impact of the pandemic in one of our previous episodes, but a real resurgence of that social anxiety in the pandemic, almost that stripping away of the normal levels of communication and support and socializing took me back at times to quite a dark place where, again, some of those practices that I was able to draw upon felt like a real lifeline at times. And I think it's a very, we've even identified it. It's a really common experience to feel like you have to be okay all the time. You have to be productive. You have to be helping other people or emotionally caretaking for other people, which I know is much more common for women as well. But actually that's a burden for a child to feel, like they're responsible for other people's well-being. And so part of the journey for me has been trying to just reclaim some of that, maybe some of that like playfulness and joy and carefreeness that I didn't necessarily gift myself as a younger person. And then I just particularly wanted to mention an experience that I had last year, which is one of the hardest experiences of my life and is an experience that many, many women, more than I ever knew, had been through, and that was the loss of a pregnancy, a miscarriage. It was a baby that I very much wanted, and I felt the universe had really kind of thrown me a gift when I became pregnant. Again, it would have been my second child, and unfortunately, wasn't meant to be. And I remember, just feeling deeply despairing, feeling kind of mistrusting of my body, and honestly feeling quite hard done by, quite sort of, I don't want to say self-pitying, because I think it was fair. I think it was valid to feel that low and like I was struggling. But I cannot tell you how grateful I was to just have known some of the ways to navigate through that. And it was not to say that it made, the experience not painful, because I had months of, feeling very tearful, finding tiny events that wouldn't have bothered me before actually really hard to manage. And I now understand that in the framing it in the state of my nervous system, I was deeply upset and depleted, and I was really depressed. I didn't want to get out of bed. I did literally kind of hide under my duvet for a good few weeks, kind of withdrew from social connection, but navigating my way through that with these very gentle, sort of non-demanding ways of just giving myself gentle recovery. And part of that was also looking, we talked about gratitude in our last episode, was looking for things to, not to say, oh, I feel shit, but it's fine because there's loads of stuff to be grateful for, but alongside the difficulty, there are things to be grateful for, where one doesn't overcome the other. And I mentioned before conscious connected breathwork, and I just wanted to, as a tool for kind of helping emotional expression. And I just wanted to share an experience that I had, which was actually earlier this year when I was doing my teacher training, and I was really kind of expressing and experiencing just more layers of grief that I hadn't kind of come to, which were all associated with the pregnancy loss. And at one point during my breathwork session, I realized that I had turned my body over from kind of laying flat on the mat, which is how I would traditionally practice. I'd moved in without kind of realizing even, my body had moved over into an all fours position. I was rotating my hips, which is exactly what I did in labor with my son. And I was crying, and I didn't realize it at the time. But after the session, I had this realization of like my body was physically working out some of the grief, some of the movement that it wasn't able to execute because my pregnancy kind of never reached its term, and how quite kind of liberating and very healing that was. So I guess I'm deeply grateful to my body and all of our bodies for everything they hold for us, and and just for knowing the practices I could draw upon to help me navigate through that. And hopefully by sharing this, if there are any other women that have experienced any of those things, including the pregnancy loss, it's not to say that those tools take the pain away, because they don't, but they definitely certainly helped me navigate it in what I think was a healthier way than other things that I might have turned to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lauren.
Thank you.
Really, and it's interesting that your body did that for you almost, isn't it?
Isn't it?
It's because the expression that your body, I don't think we're so particularly us British people. Apparently we've got, we're so stiff upper lipped, and we can't express, I think it's getting better.
Yeah,
I think it's getting better. And I think as generations are going on, I think I've definitely noticed it, being older than both of you. I kind of notice that throughout the sort of decades, and now we've got the new lot of young people coming in. I love the way young people now they just express themselves so freely, which I find just so refreshing.
Yeah.
And your body expressed what it needed to express, and you were in a safe place for that to happen.
Yeah.
And that was, so healing for you.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for sharing that with us.
My pleasure.
I hope that does help. I just hope that, helps somebody through really tricky, really difficult time. Thank you. Jen, I know when we spoke over sort of, I think over video, just to introduce ourselves to each other. You've also been through tricky times as well, haven't you?
Yes.
And do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is what it's all about, isn't it? It's making other people feel that they're not alone. If there's anybody who's experienced anything that I've experienced, hopefully you can take something away from this. So I feel like mental health and my journey has definitely started from a very young age. So I lost my dad when I was it was just before my 5th birthday. So I experienced grief from a very young age. And growing up at school, I definitely felt like I noticed that our family dynamic was not the same as a lot of my school friends, Lauren's sister being one of them, which is so bizarre. And unfortunately, I didn't get along with my stepdad, and I ended up leaving home when I was about 18, 19. And I spent a lot of my sort of like late teens, early 20s sofa surfing, partying, not taking care of my body and my health, and really not looking after myself at all. And I kind of ended up in a relationship that was incredibly abusive. It was a very controlling, narcissistic relationship. And he controlled every aspect of my life, from, taking friends away from me, controlling my finances, racking up debt, because that was when payday loans were so easy to get back then, and they didn't do the checks. He knew my details. They didn't need to speak to you or anything. So I had a lot of debt racked up in my name, and I was constantly kind of told on a daily basis that I was worthless, that I'm not good enough, and all of these awful, awful things. And when you're trapped in a relationship like that, you believe everything that they say, and you feel like you cannot escape that at all. And that was really, really hard. So like navigating that, I used to be very confident, outgoing, and, like to think that I had a lot of friendship groups and everything, and being completely cut off and kind of isolated was a very difficult time for me. That being said, I did end up going traveling because I thought that would solve all of our relationship problems and everything else. If I could take him away from the area and the people he was hanging out with, and we're going to be fine, and it's all going to be all singing, all dancing. And in fact, it didn't. And I'm very grateful for all the people that I met whilst I was traveling. I had some amazing experiences, which I'm so grateful for. But the relationship itself, it wasn't good at all. And I think it came to almost a head when we were in Thailand. And unfortunately, the hostel that we were working at, unfortunately, a young lad took his life. And we were the first people to find him.
Oh, gosh. That must have been very tricky.
Really, really tricky. And I definitely didn't deal with it at the time. I was like, no, I don't want to go back home. I can't go back home like this, and it was really, really hard. So experiencing that. And then when the relationship broke down even further, it got to a point where it became almost physical. He went to hit me, broke his hand, got taken away to another island for an operation. And I thought, I have to get out of this.
Yeah.
So I managed to get hold of my mum, and I packed my bags and I left. And that was a massive sort of turning point for me. And then my journey really began from the minute I got home, trying to figure out who I was, what I liked. For being told for so long, how to dress, what you're allowed to do, who you're allowed to talk to, all of these things. Like, I had to rediscover myself completely and rekindle a lot of my friendships and make some wonderful new friendships and things like that as well. And that's kind of where my journey began, trying to like figure out, what can I do to make myself feel good again? What can I do to make me happy, make me laugh, and like, enjoy life again? And deal with all this trauma and everything that I'd been through. And that's kind of how I then discovered, yoga and kind of all of the different practices that we've talked about. And they still do to this day. They help me. And even when I have my low moments, I now know I have these tools that will help me feel better.
Yeah.
And I lean on them every day, like, to keep me level-headed.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Jen,
Thank
so
you,
much
Jen.
for sharing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you sharing that story, because I know that's sadly, a very familiar story to lots of people in many different ways, you know, of that controlling relationship and, you know, difficult upbringing, etc. So, and I know that's, you know, it's all sort of, it all layers upon itself, doesn't it?
100%.
Yeah, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Because of course, with the childhood issues of, and you know, and the grief of your dad and etc., it all just kind of layers itself on top of each other to a point where, you know, you get to this point. And well done you, though. And I remember being in a very similar situation to you of going, okay, what do I like doing? What do I like watching on the TV? And what do you know, what are my interests? Because I think when you're a mum and you're bringing up children and you've got a family and you're working, sometimes you get a bit lost within all of that, don't you? And you lose your identity a little bit. You know, you're not Nettee, you're not Jen, you're not Lauren, you are the teacher, you are this person, you are this person, and you kind of forget who you particularly are because of emotional problems, you throw yourself into your work or you throw yourself into something that will distract you away from those feelings that you have. And actually what I found, it distracts you for an amount of time, but it all catches up with you, doesn't it? It all catches up with you. And well done you for having the courage to get away, for starters, because that's the first big step that I know a lot of people find difficult.
Yeah,
that first step.
I definitely struggled. There was an ongoing battle in my mind of, you know, if I stay, then at least I have somewhere to be. And, you know, despite all the bad things that's happened and all of this, but, you know, it was the uncertainty, it was the unknown. Like, if I leave, what's going to happen? Like, and when you're being told constantly and, you know, you've got nowhere to go, you've got this, you're like, well, they're right. What if they're right? And it was,
you believe them, don't you?
You do believe them.
Because you think, well, how am I going to manage for money? Where am I going to live? What am I going to do? You know, they're going to find me anyways, whatever I do. And you kind of, and that's the things that stop you from leaving that situation. And sometimes it can go on for so long. But when people from the outside looking in kind of think, well, why don't they just leave? Yeah, it's very simple for people to say. But when you're within that situation, it can go on for years.
Yeah.
You can be having those feelings for years, can't you? So thank you so much for being brave, and thank you, Lauren, as well, for sharing.
Pleasure.
You know,
Well done,
because I think just hearing these things, and also just talking, every time you talk about these things, I feel it's all part of our own personal healing as well. When you talk about the trauma that you've been through, as a lot of you know, and I'm starting to sharing it a little bit more openly, and also on Instagram I shared it. You know, the subject briefly, but of course I come from trauma as a child, and which a lot of people do, but that does affect sort of your whole sort of how you grow into being an adult. And but every time I talk about it, you know, before, for years and years and years, I didn't mention it to anybody. It was like my secret.
Taboo.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was taboo. You wouldn't talk about things like that.
I think there's a lot of shame, isn't there?
Yeah.
Particularly if you're a child or a younger person, our natural default at that time in our life is to think, oh, well, if something bad happened to me, it's because I did something wrong.
Yeah.
I wasn't lovable enough. I wasn't good enough. I didn't try hard enough, whatever that is. And so I guess my take on it is almost like talking about it. It's putting shame in its own place, isn't it? Because it's saying, look at me sharing and being vulnerable and not being rejected by people or ridiculed or whatever. Because actually what happens is, it's like Brene Brown, she's talking about kind of actually being vulnerable is immensely brave and courageous.
Yeah.
And like you saying how young younger generation are, they're more emotionally literate, more able to own things. It's immensely vulnerable, and it shows us we're all the same.
We're all
we've had different experiences, but at the core of it all, we all want the same things. Like we want to be loved, to be safe, to be seen for who we are.
Yeah, you took the words straight out of my mouth, because I was literally going to say exactly the same thing. That's all we want in life, isn't it?
It's what we all want.
Is that human connection, and not to be rejected, that rejection. And, every time it's kind of, I almost feel every time we talk about it, we're kind of sending it off out into the ether, and it just makes it a little bit lighter. It's almost like letting a little bit of an air out of a helium balloon. Kind of like just lets a little bit of air out every time you talk about it. It does make it easier. I couldn't even say those words, child trauma, years ago without crying, without my whole body going into this tightness. I feel my trauma right here in my stomach. Every time I talk about it, I feel it here. But every time I talk about it, it kind of just feels a little bit lighter. And so actually that's all part of the healing for me, is pushing myself to be talking about it and being more open about it, because actually there's so many people that have gone through all these things, that we've talked about today. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your honesty and you being here. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.